You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, October 19th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the program. Glad that you could join us today, where we've got all sorts of audio for you on this edition. In our cannabis headline news, I've got a clip for you from Attorney General Jeff Sessions saying something sensible about marijuana policy. No, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the Sling Blade Hobbit, remember the Keebler Gump, right? Mr. Jefferson Beauregard, that fella? Yeah, he said something sensible about marijuana policy. It was so shocking I had to cut the clip and bring it to you on today's show. Now, let's not get too carried away here. It's not as if he endorsed legalization or said marijuana has medical value or anything like that, or even suggested that it could be something, can you believe this, to cure the opioid epidemic? I mean, give me a break, right? Nothing crazy like that. But, well, we'll get to that right after this first intro here. We'll tell you all about it. Also coming up on the show today, some cannabis community chat, which is really more just some riffing again on two different comments that I heard in the closing plenary of the Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. One coming from a gentleman whose name is Raphael, and I didn't catch his last name, an activist out of Puerto Rico. And another one, a lengthy comment from the incredible Pastor Kenny Glasgow there at the event, who's with All of Us or None, and that leave me with a lot of questions, more questions than answers, but I want to bring that up in the cannabis community chat. Are we going to really try to end capitalism? Is that on the agenda? So that and more coming up in the cannabis community chat. And then in the radical rant, I want to finish off my rant from yesterday that I didn't complete, which was, what are my suggestions for alcohol reforms? Alcohol is by far the deadliest drug in our society. And yet we as drug policy reformers don't talk about it much, other than marijuana is a whole lot safer than it. So where should alcohol policy be set? I'll take a look at what we've done for other drugs. But first, let's get to the news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Thursday, October 19th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions indicated on Wednesday, while testifying at an oversight hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, that he supports letting more people grow marijuana for research purposes.
We have a marijuana research system working now, but there's one supplier of the marijuana for that research. I believe there are now 26 applications for approval of suppliers. So I think it'd be healthy to have some more competition in the supply, but I'm sure we don't need 26 new suppliers.
Most of the Democratic candidates hoping to take on Republican Governor Bruce Rauner next year agreed they would support legalizing marijuana in Illinois. The Chicago Tribune reports that State Senator Daniel Biss and entrepreneur and philanthropist J.B. Pritzker cast the issue as a matter of keeping people out of the criminal justice system, saying minorities are often subjected to harsher punishment for pot-related crimes. Businessman Chris Kennedy said he was, quote, for full decriminalization, end quote, but he also called for a study of the drug's effects. Madison County County Regional School Superintendent Bob Daber said he would be willing to approve a law legalizing the drug, quote, but I want a referendum that says the people passed it, end quote. Just one candidate was opposed to the idea. Activist Teo Hardiman, who is on his second attempt at the Democratic nomination for governor, said he was supportive of reducing criminal penalties for people who are caught with small amounts of marijuana, but he said he wasn't sure he would, quote, fully support legalization because he wouldn't want to be seen as endorsing use of marijuana. A state referendum to convene a constitutional convention to legalize marijuana is being ignored by major drug policy organizations. Jerome DeWald, a Manhattan resident who is one of the organizers of Restrict and Regulate in New York State, calls it, quote, a viable pathway to legalizing marijuana in New York State, end quote. But the Buffalo News reports that Melissa Moore, the deputy state director in New York of the Drug Policy Alliance, said her group supports marijuana legalization, but is neutral on Proposal 1, which would approve a constitutional convention in which marijuana reform may or may not be considered. Quote, we recognize that opening up the state constitution would also touch on a lot of issues well beyond marijuana legalization, many of which could potentially end up being altered in ways that would hurt our members or our allies who live more than single-issue lives, end quote, Moore said. AP reports that Maine's Republican governor is proposing that lawmakers consider simply delaying recreational marijuana sales instead of passing a legislative rewrite of the voter-approved marijuana law. The Maine legislature is set to return Monday to consider a rewrite offered by a legislative committee handling marijuana implementation. Republican House Minority Leader Ken Fredette said he is sponsoring Governor Paul LePage's bill to delay recreational marijuana sales to January 2019. Lawmakers had previously pushed back implementation to February. Fredette said there are concerns about the committee's proposal and lawmakers having the time to read the 70-page bill, which would also delay sales into 2019. Advocacy group Legalize Maine said the committee's bill would make it harder to set up marijuana businesses. The bill would require towns to opt in to the adult use marijuana market. In international news, Italy has just approved medical cannabis use nationwide. Italian doctors may now prescribe cannabis-based medical products for pain therapy and other uses for a 3-month period. Cultivation of cannabis, preparation, and distribution at pharmacies is entrusted to the pharmaceutical chemical plant of Florence, and importation from other nations may be approved. Meanwhile, leaders from the Green parties in Australia and Germany have announced progress in securing medicinal cannabis access in those countries. Australian Green leader Richard De Natale said it was, quote, simple cruelty to block fast-track access for the terminally ill and has filed a motion to address the issue. In Germany, Young Liberals leader Konstantin Kuhl said, quote, cannabis legalization is within reach and that, quote, current drug policy is no longer up to date, end quote, referring to upcoming talks between the more liberal Free Democrat and Green parties to form a coalition government with the Conservatives. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Thursday, October 19th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. If you appreciate my full-time dedication to reporting and analyzing the news about cannabis, consider becoming a patron of the show. For just $4.20 per month, you'll help keep my live stream and podcast free while earning yourself your own private ad-free podcast link for the show, as well as links to the supporting articles and data. For a $9.99 VIP subscription, you'll get all that plus my exclusive research, data tables, and graphics. Just log on to mjaddenda.com and click the Become a Patron button today.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaman Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay. rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult cannabis prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
Today in the Cannabis Community Chat, I want to address points that were made at the Drug Policy Alliance's reform conference that just took place in Atlanta, Georgia. During the closing plenary sessions, we got to hear from an array of fantastic speakers, people with plenty of experience and education on the issues. And it's important that we recognize and embrace a more diverse set of opinions. And that's one of my favorite things about going to DPA is getting to hear from people from all around the world, all walks of lives, all races, ethnicities, and cultures, and what they're doing in drug policy reform. And we got to hear from two gentlemen. And I want to apologize because I did not catch the name of the first gentleman. He's from Puerto Rico. I believe his first name's Rafael, but the applause went up so loud on my recording I couldn't make out what his last name was. But he's from Puerto Rico, and he was speaking in reference to, having survived the Category 5 hurricane that's happened, Hurricane Maria, and the devastation that's been wrought on the island, and what he's been doing in drug policy reform, drug policy harm reduction in Puerto Rico to help people. But then he went on to call on us to go big, right? Which was, he was evoking Michelle Alexander's opening plenary speech, which I played on a couple of episodes back, where Michelle Alexander spoke to the racial injustice and the economic injustice that's in the war on drugs and how we need to kind of fight for reparations to the communities that have been devastated from the drug war, low these 40 years and long even before that. And so Raphael had this to say. I'm going to play the clip for you and just to see what your reaction might be to this.
We need to think big. So what does that mean for me right now? Coming from Puerto Rico after the devastating Category 5 hurricane, what does that mean? Thinking big for me right now is thinking that harm reduction should work towards the end of colonialism. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking about right there. We don't do this, what are we doing? That we should work for the end of imperialism, and why not? Let's say the end of capitalism, which is this Category 5 hurricane is making things kind of clear for me right now, the disparities.
So I know the audio is a little harsh, but basically he said harm reduction should work for an end to colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Let that sink in for a second. Harm reduction, talking about, and in the context of harm reduction, we're talking about drug harm reduction, right? Like offering clean needles to heroin users, doing club drug testing for kids that use ecstasy, making sure we legalize marijuana so consumers can get a tested, inspected product that's regulated and so forth, right? Harm reduction should work for an end to colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Wow, I didn't know I was signing up for all that. And this is, I'm concerned. I mean, I imagine activists trying to go, hi there, I'm with MI Legalize, and we'd be really interested in your opinions on the legalization of marijuana in the state of Michigan and ending capitalism. I mean, you think you're going to win an election in the middle of America, anywhere, if people know that in your goal is the end of capitalism? It's a great applause line at DPA, and maybe, for the people that are suffering under in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, maybe that gets some sympathy or applause or whatever. But man, it's not going to get you any votes in Michigan trying to go for legalization of marijuana. It's not going to get you any votes in Oklahoma going for medical marijuana, or Utah going for medical marijuana, or Missouri going for medical marijuana. We want to end capitalism. Man, capitalism is what got us where we're at so far. We had people talking for years about the injustice of marijuana arrests, the waste of money on the global scale, on the national scale, the waste of possible of police resources. We've been talking about marijuana as a medicine for, centuries, if you want to go back to O'Shaughnessy, but at least since 1996, when it was legalized in California for those purposes. We covered all the angles. It wasn't until we started talking about how much money could be made that people started voting yes on this. Now, I'm not trying to say that, I'm the biggest defender of capitalism. Obviously, huge problems with it. All sorts of things that should be fixed. But is that the job of the drug reform movement to fix those things? Especially if you're saying in the context of harm reduction. Do we mean harm reduction from the act of taking drugs? Or do we mean harm reduction from the act of breathing in this society, right? How and at what point do these goals become possibly contradictory? At what point are we going to say we'll allow there to be a short-term suffering in the pursuit of long-term gains? I want to play another clip before I get too deep into this. This is a clip from Pastor Kenny Glasgow. Fantastic public speaker. Amazing man. Works with New York's All of Us or None. Been doing phenomenal work in Brooklyn. So this is Pastor Glasgow, and he's talking about, when he talks about Pookie, he gives talks, and I've seen his talks before in previous drug policy conferences. And he talks about, when we legalized, we screwed Pookie, right? Pookie being the metaphorical drug dealer, the metaphorical weed dealer on the corner, right? We screwed Pookie because here Pookie was slinging bags to support his family because it's the only opportunity he's got. Because of the centuries of, economic disadvantage for African American people, and redlining, and bad neighborhoods, and bad schools, and slavery, and Jim Crow, and just piled all on top of each other, that finally, once we legalized, and we'd been putting the Pookies in jail for years and years and years, been putting Pookies in jail, while white kids come down to Brooklyn and buy their weed and then go back off to the suburbs and never get busted. But now that we legalized, Pookie's getting left out, right? Because Pookie's got a criminal record and Pookie can't get a license now. The well-capitalized Harvard MBAs are coming in with their money, white guys coming in with the money, and they're building the pot shops out this way and that way and the other way, and they're making money. And the Pookies are getting screwed. Blacks did time, whites make dime, right? So that's the context of what Pastor Glasgow was talking about when he talks about don't screw Pookie. And so let me play you this clip.
So when you hear me talk about Pookie, I'm only talking about the equity. So it's not just that we end the drug war, we do it in an equitable way. Because if you just want to get high and keep me broke and my family poor, we still have a problem. So at a certain point, if I can't come in this room and say we need to struggle around the question of equity, because it may not be drug policy money that moves the question of legalization of marijuana. It could be the money coming out of Silicon Valley that moves the question of marijuana, and it could have moved the question of marijuana in the state of California. And they may not care about equity in a real way. Because like we have forgotten that when we ended prohibition, alcohol prohibition, we had black bootleggers and we didn't acquire distilleries or the business that came with it once it was legalized. Y'all don't remember in my community we was running numbers. And we decided to do lottery. We screwed Pookie. And I can't hold y'all accountable for that part of it. But what about right now? We're on the cusp of legalizing marijuana. And if we don't have this conversation and we don't act like a family, we will practice the ugly part of being an American. Racism, supremacy, and exclusion. So I ask you, family, let's not screw Pookie.
So this brings up another question, or a series of questions for me, right? Which is, you know, when Pastor Kenny talks about not just ending the drug war, but ending it in an equitable way, that we need to concentrate on that, and that if we just talk about getting high, but my family is still poor and can't eat, we still got a problem. And I'd argue that, yeah, we still got a problem, but it's no longer a drug prohibition problem. It's an economic inequity problem. At what point does the drug reform community narrow its focus on drugs and not on solving everything else that's wrong? Like, you know, NARAL pro-choice focuses on women's reproductive health. They didn't get involved in the gay marriage debate. NRA focuses on Second Amendment and making sure everybody can have whatever the hell gun they want, whenever they want, however they want, within, certain parameters. They don't get involved in tax, Grover Norquist tax dispute thing. Right? I'm not disagreeing with the speakers. I'm as progressive, liberal, lefty as many people, right? Absolutely. End inequity. Let's have reparations. Let's fix these problems with our economic engine. But if I got to wear the marijuana legalizer hat, at some point I got to draw a line and say, look, that's out of my lane. That's not my issue to deal with. And there's a couple. I want to get to some real world examples of this, right? Ohio, issue 3. I know. I'm like the only guy that liked Ohio issue 3, but fact is I didn't like it much. I thought it was awful as far as how it wrote the Constitution and who could grow where in the Constitution. But I had to look at that and say, look, the economic issue is not my problem. I didn't get involved with this to determine who was going to get rich. I got in this to stop people from having to go to jail because they had weed, or they were looking for weed, or they were growing weed. That's my lane. That's what I'm into. So when it came down to issue 3, I'm like, look, this thing passes. Patients get medicine. Consumers don't go to jail. They no longer suffer searches. They no longer suffer seizures. And since those things happen disproportionately to Black and Latino people, it's a win, isn't it? Wouldn't that be a win? Even if Nick Lachey and Frosty Rucker get a little richer, wouldn't that be a win for what we're trying to achieve? Oh, no, we can't have that regulatory cap. And really, I'll tell you, a lot of the reason people got upset at that Ohio issue 3 was the regulatory capture was other white guys were upset that they were cut out, right? that was the issue, right? Is that this was Ohio issue 3 was just a distillation of what other legalizations kind of are. It's just the club was a whole lot smaller. The club of white guys was a whole lot smaller this time, although Frosty Rucker's not. But you get my point. Now we've got this issue with the New York Proposition 1. Okay, we've talked about this in the past. New York Proposition 1. Is it 19 years or 20 years, something like that? Every couple decades in New York, under their constitution, there can be a call for a constitutional convention for the state. So Jerome DeWald, who, full disclosure, is a guy who's been a supporter of mine for years and had numerous contacts with him. But Jerome DeWald, this investor type in Manhattan, is running this thing for legalization in New York. And his plan is, A, get a constitutional convention. B, at that constitutional convention, propose an amendment legalizing marijuana. Now, I'd go about it a different way. I'd propose the Constitutional Convention, and my sole issue would be to put in the Constitution the power of a citizen initiative in the state of New York. That way you get all the disparate groups together on one thing they could all agree on and not have to bring the politics of anything else, right, into the mix. Now, I told you how the response from Drug Policy Alliance is we're neutral on this Proposition 1 thing, neutral on the Constitutional Convention, because as their spokesperson said, it opens Pandora's box, so to speak, that once you say there can be a constitutional convention, the gun rights people can come in and say, we want a constitutional right to have machine guns. And the abortion haters can come in and say, constitutional should say that the fetus has a constitutional right to live. And, you know, you have all the different issues in there fighting for their different amendments. So again, are we the fix everything movement? Are we the fix society movement or the drug policy reform movement? Because if you're strictly looking at this as drug policy reform, starting a constitutional convention in New York into which there could be a constitutional amendment, only the second one in America to legalize marijuana after Colorado's constitutional amendment, would be a significant win and be a significant victory. Whether or not it opens up a fight for gun people or abortion people or gay rights people or these other people, whether that's their fight to win or lose, isn't it? That's the questions I have here. And to go on to the Pookie analogy, as Pastor Kenny went on the Pookie analogy, he's talked about how, you know, when Prohibition ended, there were a lot of black bootleggers who then weren't allowed to become distillery owners or, you know, brewers or whatever. Yeah, that is absolutely true. But that was a function of the racist structure of the economy in general. Black folks weren't allowed to do a lot of different things. The problem I've got with this whole this idea of the reparations is I'm for it to an extent, okay? But I'm for it in the sense that we have reparations for the victims of the drug war, not the black victims of the drug war, the Latino victims of the drug war, the gay victims of the drug war, the victims of the drug war, okay? Easy way you could do it, right? Obviously, these licensing things where, you know, you can't get a license if you had a prior conviction, obviously that's harmful. That's you know, hurting people of color who are trying to get licenses and get involved in this. Obviously that is. So what I would do, you know, because Oakland tried to do this thing where, the certain neighborhoods will have these many shops and certain districts, people from these districts will have certain many licenses and so on. Getting way too granular on this. It's a simple thing. You set up a system by which someone who has a prior conviction for a marijuana-related crime gets bonus points. They get bonus points. They get extra consideration for getting the first licenses, right? Our goal is to get people who were in the illegitimate market in the legitimate market, right? So give them bonuses. Give them enticements to join the legitimate market. If they got caught 2 or 3 times, they get more and more points. Now, that's going to help people who are black or Latino because they more disproportionately got busted. But if I'm trying to sell this to a white guy in the rural part of the state who got busted for weed too, who's got a poor family as well, who also is a Pookie, who could get screwed out of stuff, he gets the same bonus points, right? This way we can fend off attacks from the right and people that would say, you know, it's all social justice warrior, it's all, you know, race baiting. We can fend that off and say, no, it works equally for everybody. Now, in effect, it's going to help people of color more because they got busted more. But that's the way I would start attacking this because, you know, these are great applause lines at DPA in front of a highly progressive audience. But then I have to go to the Midwest. I have to go to the South. I have to go to Idaho, the Intermountain West. I have to go to places where if you tried to say we're going to end capitalism and give all the pot licenses to black people, you're not going to win any elections. And I got one other thing I got to bring up when Pastor Kenny tried to make the comparison to running the numbers. He talks about how there was running the numbers, which was basically gambling, the lottery, the informal lottery run by, you know, kids, black kids running back and forth to the bookies and so forth, right? And then he says, then we legalized the lotto and we screwed Pookie. But when we legalized the lotto, we didn't give that to independent white businessmen to go run it, right? So the analogy falls apart a little bit because this isn't like alcohol or marijuana, where the business is becoming dominated by white people. The business got run by the state. The business got run by the state when we made Lotto. So it's not a really good analogy. And the other thing I've got about this, and I'll just wrap this up, is really this has a lot to do with, are we going to make incremental progress on drug reform, even if it doesn't move forward on racism, inequality, and so forth, right? And I always think to the history of civil rights, to the history of from Emancipation Proclamation through Jim Crow, through Brown v. Board of Education, through Loving v. Virginia, through a Civil Rights Act, and so forth, right? That these things happen in steps. And we didn't reject the Emancipation Proclamation because we knew Jim Crow was coming, and we didn't reject going forward on having our schools be integrated just because we knew they would be unequal for years and years to come. We take what we can get and we establish a beachhead and we move forward from there. And I guess I'm arguing that when it comes to drug policy reform, getting it legal has to supersede getting it equal. We got to get it legal first. You can't ask for legality and equality at the same time. That's just the way I see it. We got to get it legal, then we can get it equal. Let's start from there. Thanks for listening. The Cannabis Community Chat.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am ill. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
People don't smoke marijuana.
Yesterday in the rant, I talked about the discussion between Dan Riffle and Steve Fox at the Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference in Atlanta regarding the policies and marketing for marijuana compared to the policies and marketing for alcohol. And the main point of the discussion was Dan Riffle questioning the drug policy reform movement, that if we're so all about harm reduction and we're all about making sure we bring down deaths and societal harm from harmful drugs, then why are we so silent on alcohol policy and alcohol marketing? What's going on there? Alcohol is by far the most deadly drug in our society. We're talking about 60,000 potential deaths here from opiate overdoses in 2016. There are 88,000 people or more dying from alcohol in this country. Yet nothing coming out of Drug Policy Alliance on the issue of alcohol. Yeah, you understand why Marijuana Policy Project or NORML or National Cannabis Industry doesn't say anything. That makes sense. But Students for Sensible Drug Policy and the Drug Policy Alliance, where's the call for reforms to our alcohol laws? Now, I know politically why. Duh. Alcohol's huge. Alcohol's major ingrained into our culture, into our society. The problem with saying that, though, is that's the same argument that the Kevin Subets and the prohibitionists of the world give when we confront them on trying to regulate marijuana, and we say, well, what about alcohol? And we also bring it on ourselves when we say regulate marijuana like alcohol. But really, I'd love to see marijuana regulated like alcohol. It'd be great. But the question that got asked was, where should the bar be set, pardon the pun, for alcohol? What should be the rational societal policies for alcohol? If you believe that the current policies, which I do, are far too lax. Now, you may not think the policies are too lax. You might say, look, hey, adults, freedom. You can go to the store. You can buy liquor. You can buy as much of it as you want. You can take it home and you can drink as much of it as you want. You can go to public places and drink it. You can drink it when kids are around. We'll have every entity that makes it can advertise it and advertise it with skimpy girls in bikinis and lots of fun and music and graphics. And yeah, it's going to kill 80, 90,000 people a year. Because of that, because we allow so many people to have as much of it anytime they want. So, but we're cool with it. Maybe we are. And obviously we are. We're cool with that. We're cool with our guns. We're cool with our gun deaths. We're cool with our alcohol deaths. Anybody that thinks America's a pro-life country hasn't been paying attention, right? We're cool with it. Now, if that's the case, fine. If the case is that we're cool with the way alcohol policy is, then I got to be on Steve Fox's side and say, all right, if that's where we set the bar for alcohol, then marijuana's got to be below it. Marijuana's got to be below that bar. Alcohol can't have a competitive edge in marketing when it's more harmful. If we're not going to do direct harm reduction on alcohol, we've given up direct harm reduction on alcohol. We do indirect harm reduction on alcohol by making marijuana more available and promoted and accepted and celebrated. Try to bring people over from the alcohol camp into the marijuana camp. That would be indirect harm reduction on alcohol. But what if we did set the bar higher for alcohol? Now, it is kind of a fantasy to think about that. But also, I can remember a time. I'm old enough to remember a time. I was a kid, but I remember this time when you could smoke on an airplane. You could smoke in a movie theater. Smoke in a restaurant. People smoked on TV while they read the news. Like news anchors smoked on TV. Like, I'm not that old. I guess I'm not that old. But that would have been a fantasy back then to think of what tobacco laws are like now. So it's not like it's not possible to set the bar much higher. We've done it. So how would we set the bar higher for alcohol? What would we do? What sort of alcohol reforms should we try? And I figure I got some new ideas, and then I got some ideas I'm going to steal from pharmaceuticals and from tobacco and from marijuana. Let's steal some of the ideas they want to use on marijuana and use them for alcohol and see how the public likes it. Let's start with one of my ideas, the breathalyzer valet. Now, I often talk about how in every city in America, we have at least one building, but most likely plenty more. A building that is specifically for taking drugs. It's exactly why it's there, is to take drugs. The purpose of going there is to take drugs and get high. And not only that, we entice people to come to that place and take drugs and get high. I mean, we have live music at these places. We have, contests. We have specials. We have giveaways. We have all sorts of special parties. Everything we can do to try to get people to come to the building where you're supposed to take drugs and get high. Now, I'm for the building where you take drugs and get high. I think that's great. But the thing that always gets me about this is in every city in America, that building where you go to take drugs and get high has a parking lot. It's got a parking lot. We let people drive their cars to this building where you take drugs and get high, park their cars there. And then after 2, 3, 4 hours of taking drugs and getting high, we just trust them to get back in their cars. Now, some of them will say, well, if you've had too much, if you've taken too much drugs, if you're too high, call a cab, call a Lyft. Don't drive your car home while you're too high. Now, of course, you all know I'm talking about taverns, pubs, right? Bars, right? We don't think twice about this for alcohol. We have buildings in every city called bars where there's parking lots, and we trust adults to go there and drive their cars there and drive home. We know some of them will be too drunk. We know some of them will wreck their cars and kill people. It's guaranteed to happen, statistical certainty. And we just accept it. So why not a breathalyzer valet? You got a bar or a restaurant, tavern, pub, place that serves alcohol that has a parking lot. That parking lot must be manned by a valet who takes the keys from you, parks your car, and then you go and have fun, get drunk, whatever you're going to do. And when you come out, you got to blow on the breathalyzer. That valet will not give your keys back until you blow below 0.08. Now, I can hear critics already. Well, there'll be fights, there'll be violence, there'll be all the possible problems with it. Right? How about this? Everybody parks their car, all the cars get booted, and the only way to get the boot off is to blow into a breathalyzer, like breathalyzer boots on the cars. And then some people say, well, Russ, then people won't park at the parking lots. They'll park 3, 4 parking lots down. They'll park off the street somewhere. Okay, fine. And then when they're leaving the bar, we'll get to watch them walk a block or two, right? We'll get to see them stumbling around, right? An eagle-eyed police officer could spot the bumbling pedestrian with the keys in his hand making his way to the car. I don't know. Again, this is like, if you really wanted to reduce the harms for alcohol, let's start with breathalyzer valets. How about alcohol advertising? That's a big one, right? Like you see beer ads all the time. You're even seeing alcohol booze ads now, right? We didn't used to see the booze ads. They didn't used to have the whiskey ads and the like Mila Kunis for Jack Daniels or whatever. It was just beer, but now it's beer and alcohol. So what about restrictions for beer ads, right? Beer sponsoring the Super Bowl, beer all over sports, right? How about we do the whole tobacco thing with beer ads? Same restrictions as tobacco. There are still tobacco ads. There's just, they're very hard to find anymore because they have to be like adults only venues, adults only publications and so forth. Right? So do the same thing with alcohol. Right? There used to be Winston Cup NASCAR racing. Cigarettes sponsored NASCAR racing. There used to be Marlboro advertising in the outfields of Major League Baseball and such. So it's like, we couldn't lose the advertising from sports. BS. People will watch sports. Some new advertiser will step in. Let's get rid of those beer ads. And while we're at it, get rid of the pharmaceutical ads too. Let's not be hypocrites here. In fact, the United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical ads on TV. That's another rant. I know another thing too, right? Let's not just get rid of the pro-alcohol ads that you see everywhere, right? Let's also air anti-alcohol ads, or at least, hey, how about we'll do a compromise. I know. We'll do a compromise. Let's take a page from the pharmaceutical rules, right? You've seen the pharmaceutical ads. Big pharma ads, the Abilify, right, where they tell you, it's all sweet and nice. Oh, my depression is so much better. I've taken Abilify. And at the end, you get the side effects may include sudden death and sweats and fevers and anal leakage. And right, it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I want this stuff after all. Right? Let's do that. How come alcohol ads aren't like pharmaceutical ads? How come alcohol ads don't have to have side effects listed with them? So I decided to put together one. Here's an example of what an alcohol ad would sound like if we had to have the side effects added.
Great time at the party you hosted, but I'm kind of embarrassed because I didn't realize you felt that way about me.
Party was great. But I should explain I'm currently seeing someone. But if that changes, maybe we can get together.
Getting unusual feedback from your company this year? It's because you served Corona. No other beer says how much you love your guests better than serving Canada's #1 premium import beer. And until December 31st, Corona is offering special savings on 6-packs at the LCBO and the beer store.
Corona beer, ethyl alcohol, is for adults age 21 and older. Please use responsibly. Side effects of alcohol use may include drowsiness, hyperemesis, diarrhea, gastrointestinal discomfort, headaches, difficulty breathing, impaired judgment, slurred speech, decreased perception and coordination, anemia, and amnesia. Long-term use of ethyl alcohol has been associated with firearm injuries, sexual assault, domestic violence, hypertension, stroke, heart attack, cirrhosis of the liver, impotence, brain damage, cancers of the mouth and throat, and in some cases, fatal episodes. Talk to your doctor before consuming Corona beer, especially if you're taking prescription medications such as opioid painkillers, as severe, possibly fatal drug interactions can occur.
Hey Bob, it's Phil. Corona Extra. I love you too, man.
Of course, yeah, that the beer companies have to spend twice as much on the ad buys because the side effects are half the damn ad. But hey, they got money to burn. Let's have that. How about that? Let's just make that requirement. Every beer ad has to have a side effects reading, just like a pharmaceutical ad. Only seems fair. Now let's take some ideas from the marijuana industry, right? What if we were to regulate alcohol like marijuana? Forget about this treat marijuana like alcohol. Treat alcohol like marijuana. What would that be like? Let's start with childproof containers. All your alcohol that you purchase has to be in childproof containers. And when you take it out of the store, it has to be in an opaque childproof envelope. Right? You have to, a little zip. How the hell does this thing work? They push the thing and pull the tab and separate the, God damn it. Oh, I forgot my childproof bag. I have to buy another childproof bag. Let's do that for alcohol. Let's see how long that lasts. That'll be good. And the packaging. Oh my God, we got to change the packaging on the alcohol, right? The packaging on the alcohol needs to be like no graphics. Can't have graphics. Can't have cartoon characters. Can't have pictures of fruit. No pictures of fruit or anything colorful that the kids would like. Let's treat alcohol like marijuana. No graphic packaging, right? Purchase limits. You can't just go in and buy all the alcohol you want to buy. Why? You might take some of that and try to sell it to other people. We got to have purchase limit. 1 12-pack of beer. That's it. You can buy a 12-pack of beer and 1 bottle of whiskey, 1/5, let's say per month. That's all you need, right? That's all you need. Any more would be abuse, wouldn't it? If this is all sounding absurd to you, it should. Because we accept this amazing difference between marijuana and alcohol. And I think both Steve Fox and Dan Riffle are right. Steve Fox is right that if the bar is set here for alcohol, it's got to be set there for marijuana. You can't have a disparity between the two. But I also think Dan Riffle is right in that the bar for alcohol is set way, way too low. Too many people are dying from alcohol abuse, and too many people are affected from that abuse, from domestic violence, from sexual assault, from drunk driving. We as a drug policy reform movement really ought to think about this. We really ought to start adding our voice to harm reduction policies for alcohol. That's all the time we got for today. Time flies when you legalize. Thanks for joining us. Be back tomorrow with more news and views you can use for the cannabis community. For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.